Keanu Reeves leaned against his car, coffee cup in hand, savoring the early morning breeze. Despite the fame and the busy schedule, he always found comfort in this quiet moment before heading to the studio. The streets were calm, the sun barely peeking through the gray clouds, and the world seemed at peace. He took a slow sip, letting the warmth fill him. As he climbed into his car, he couldn't help but glance down the street toward the small bus stop. There she was, like always, a little blonde girl no more than 8, standing on the curb with a bright smile that could light up the whole block. Her small hands clutched the straps of a faded Hello Kitty backpack, and she waved at him with an energy that seemed unbreakable. Keanu smiled back, giving her a small nod and sometimes even rolling down the window to greet her. "Good morning, kiddo," he'd say, and she'd beam as if he'd just made her day. It was such a tiny thing, but it had become a part of his routine. Something about her pure, innocent joy always made his mornings feel just a little bit better. But one morning, as he turned the corner onto that familiar street, the bus stop was empty. The absence hit him harder than he expected, leaving a strange, uneasy feeling crawling up his spine. Keanu slowed down, scanning the area, convincing himself she must be running late or maybe sick. But the way his chest tightened told him otherwise. His instincts never lied. Trying to shrug off the feeling, he drove on, but the silence gnawed at him. It was unnatural. He couldn't shake the memory of just a few days ago when she looked different, less cheerful, her wave hesitant, eyes distant, like she was trapped somewhere inside her own head. Keanu remembered stopping at the red light, rolling down his window to ask if she was okay. But before she could answer, the light turned green, and he had to drive away. That hesitation in her eyes had stayed with him, bothering him more than he cared to admit. Now, with her absence glaring at him, his mind started conjuring up all kinds of possibilities. Maybe her family moved away. Maybe she was visiting relatives. Maybe, he shook his head, trying to dismiss the thought, but it clawed at him like a dark shadow. Keanu pressed harder on the gas, trying to drown out his own paranoia, but he couldn't escape the gnawing feeling that something was terribly wrong. As he reached the studio, he found it hard to focus on his lines or the scene blocking. Everyone around him seemed upbeat and ready to work, but he felt a pit in his stomach that wouldn't ease up. He tried rationalizing it. Maybe he was overthinking, getting too involved in the life of a stranger. But no matter how much he convinced himself to let it go, that image of her empty bus stop haunted him. Finally, unable to bear it any longer, he grabbed his jacket and slipped out the back door, determined to find out why she wasn't there. The drive back felt endless, his heart pounding as he neared the street again. He slowed down, peering toward the bus stop, but it was just as empty as before. He took a deep breath, deciding to ask the old lady next door, who always swept her porch in the mornings. Maybe she knew something. As he parked and approached, the woman looked up, surprised to see him. "Oh, Mr. Reeves! Didn't expect to see you back so soon," she greeted, giving him a curious glance. Keanu forced a small smile, trying to sound casual. "Good morning. I was wondering about the little girl who waits at the bus stop. Have you seen her today?" The woman's face fell, her hands pausing on the broom. "No, dear, haven't seen her since yesterday. Always there, like clockwork, but not today. It's odd, really." Keanu's stomach twisted into a knot. He could tell she sensed something off too. The old woman lowered her voice, glancing toward the house across the street. "I don't know much about her family, but I've heard yelling sometimes. The mom's always in a rush, never really talks to anyone. I didn't think much of it, but something about it just never felt right." Keanu didn't respond, his thoughts racing as a chill ran down his spine. He didn't know the girl's name or anything about her life, but he knew one thing. Ignoring his gut feeling wasn't an option. He needed to check on her, no matter how crazy it seemed. Keanu took a deep breath, glancing back at the empty bus stop, his mind refusing to let go of the uneasy feeling. He knew he had no real reason to get involved. He was just a stranger passing by every morning. But something about that girl's absence clawed at him like a restless shadow, making it impossible to ignore. He turned to the old woman, trying to sound casual despite the tension in his voice. "Have you ever talked to her mom, or seen anything unusual?" he asked, choosing his words carefully. The old woman hesitated, her gaze shifting toward the house. "Not really. I've just heard bits and pieces, arguments mostly. Always sounded rushed, like something was never quite right. The girl never looked hurt though, just tired sometimes." She sighed, leaning on her broom. "I tried to ask once if everything was okay, but the mother just brushed me off and hurried inside." Keanu felt his jaw clench, frustration gnawing at him. He couldn't help but picture the little girl's hesitant smile from just a few days ago, the way her eyes seemed to be searching for something when he greeted her. His mind replayed that moment over and over like he had missed something important. He took a step closer to the house, noticing how eerily quiet it was, though the windows were shut tight, curtains drawn like a fortress, keeping out the world. Keanu hesitated, debating whether to approach or just let it go, but his gut wouldn't stop screaming at him to do something. He moved toward the front door, giving it a gentle knock. Silence. He tried again, louder this time, his pulse pounding in his ears. Still nothing. Keanu glanced back at the old woman, who just gave a small shrug, worry etched on her face. Taking a chance, he stepped off the porch and moved around the side of the house, looking for any sign of movement inside. As he passed by the narrow kitchen window, something caught his eye. A small flicker of movement, like a shadow shifting behind the curtains. His heart thudded faster. Keanu tried the back door, finding it locked, but he wasn't ready to give up. He leaned closer to the window, tapping lightly. "Hey, it's me. Are you okay in there?" he called out gently, hoping his voice would sound comforting and not intimidating. For a long moment, nothing happened. Just as he was about to turn away, he heard a faint rustling inside. Then, almost too quiet to hear, a soft, trembling voice. "Help!" The single word sent a chill down his spine. Keanu's instincts kicked into high gear, adrenaline surging through him. He pulled out his phone, debating whether to call the police. But something stopped him, an uneasy feeling that he needed to handle this himself first. He looked around, spotting a small garden tool near the back steps. Picking it up, he wedged it carefully between the door and the frame, trying to pry it open without making too much noise. Just as he was about to give up, the latch clicked and the door creaked open slightly. Keanu pushed it wider, stepping cautiously inside. The house was dim and silent, the faint smell of something burnt lingering in the air. He called out softly, "Hey, it's okay. I'm here to help." A muffled sound came from the living room, like something scraping against the floor. He moved toward it slowly, his heartbeat thundering in his ears. As he rounded the corner, his eyes landed on a small figure huddled naked near the couch, a familiar Hello Kitty backpack lying next to her. The little girl was curled up, clutching her knees, her face buried in her arms. Keanu knelt down slowly, careful not to startle her. "Hey kiddo, it's me," he whispered. The girl looked up, her face streaked with dried tears, eyes red and swollen. Recognition flickered in her gaze, and she let out a shaky breath, barely managing a whisper. "You came back." Keanu's heart twisted painfully at the sight of her trembling figure. He carefully reached out, brushing a strand of messy blonde hair from her face. "Yeah? I'm here? You're safe now?" The girl hesitated before leaning forward, wrapping her tiny arms around his neck, as if afraid he might vanish. Keanu held her gently, feeling just how fragile she was, her small frame too light and her body shivering. He could feel the fear radiating off her, and his protective instinct surged, stronger than ever. "What happened?" he asked softly, not wanting to push but needing to know. The girl just shook her head, unable to form words, but the terror in her eyes spoke volumes. Keanu tightened his hold, determined to find out the truth and protect her no matter what. Keanu gently pulled back, looking into her fearful eyes, trying to reassure her with a soft smile. "It's okay, kiddo. You're safe now." "Can you tell me what happened?" The little girl hesitated, biting her trembling lip as she glanced toward the hallway. Keanu followed her gaze, his senses on high alert. "Is someone else here?" he whispered. She shook her head slowly, but her grip on his shirt tightened, like she was afraid he might disappear if she let go. He took a calming breath, trying to think of how to make her feel safe enough to talk. "What's your name?" he asked gently. She hesitated before whispering, "Lily." Keanu smiled, giving a small nod. "That's a beautiful name. Lily, are you hurt?" Lily didn't answer, just buried her face back into his shoulder. Keanu's hands gently patted her back, his mind racing through possibilities. He couldn't just leave her here, not when she was clearly terrified and alone. He scanned the room, noticing a few empty beer cans on the floor and a broken picture frame on the coffee table. Something wasn't right. He carefully stood up, lifting her in his arms as he moved toward the door. "Let's get you somewhere safe, okay?" he murmured. She didn't resist, just held onto him tighter, as if fearing he'd change his mind. As they stepped outside, the old woman on the porch looked over with concern, clearly relieved to see Lily, but also puzzled. "What happened?" she asked. Her voice hushed. Keanu shook his head, not wanting to overwhelm Lily by talking about it right there. "I'm taking her to get some help. If you see anyone looking for her, just don't mention anything for now." The woman gave a firm nod, sensing the gravity of the situation. As Keanu placed Lily gently in the passenger seat and buckled her in, he couldn't help but notice how pale she looked, her cheeks hollow and eyes distant, like she hadn't slept in days. His heart ached just looking at her. As he started the car, he glanced over, offering a reassuring smile. "We're going to the hospital, okay? Just to make sure you're all right." Lily didn't respond, but she didn't protest either. She just stared out the window, silent and numb. Keanu tried to distract her, talking softly as he drove. "You know, I see you at that bus stop every morning. Your smile always makes my day better. I missed it today." Lily glanced at him briefly, almost like she wasn't sure if he meant it. "You noticed?" she whispered. Keanu nodded, giving her a gentle smile. "Of course. It's hard not to notice a smile like yours." He saw the faintest hint of a smile tug at her lips before it faded again. Keanu wanted to ask more, wanted to understand what had scared her so much, but he knew pushing her now wouldn't help. The priority was getting her checked out and safe. As they pulled into the hospital parking lot, Keanu parked close to the entrance and hurried out, scooping Lily into his arms again. Nurses at the reception desk looked up, surprised to see him, but the concern on his face left no room for hesitation. "Please, she needs help," he said urgently. One of the nurses quickly stepped forward, guiding them to a nearby room where another nurse began checking Lily's vitals. Keanu stayed by her side, gently holding her hand as she lay on the examination bed, her tiny fingers wrapped around his. A doctor came in, assessing the situation with a calm yet serious demeanor. "What happened?" Keanu hesitated, not wanting to speak for Lily, but also knowing she might not be ready to explain. "I found her alone, at home. I don't know what happened, but something's not right." The doctor nodded, giving Lily a reassuring smile. "It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe here." Lily didn't say anything, just squeezed Keanu's hand tighter. The doctor glanced at him, lowering his voice. "We'll need to check for injuries and make sure she's all right. Do you know her parents?" Keanu shook his head. "No. I just see her at the bus stop every morning. I think something's been going on at home." The doctor's expression softened with understanding. "All right. We'll do our best to take care of her. You can stay if it makes her feel safe." Keanu nodded, feeling a strange sense of responsibility wash over him. He looked down at Lily, brushing a hand over her messy hair. "I'm not going anywhere," he promised softly. As the nurse took Lily's blood pressure and examined a faint bruise on her arm, Keanu's jaw heightened with barely controlled anger. He couldn't understand how anyone could hurt a child, especially one so gentle and kind. The doctor looked up, giving him a grave nod. "We'll run some tests and make sure she's okay." "It might take a while." Keanu just nodded, pulling up a chair beside Lily's bed and staying close. He didn't know what was going to happen next or how this whole situation would unfold, but one thing was clear: he wasn't leaving her alone. Hours passed and Keanu stayed right by Lily's side, refusing to move even when the nurses insisted he take a break. He could see the exhaustion on her face, the way her little hands stayed clenched as if holding on for dear life. He wanted to make everything better, to somehow erase the fear that had settled deep into her innocent eyes. Finally, a nurse came in with a clipboard, giving Keanu a sympathetic smile. "We've done a full checkup. She's stable, but she's dehydrated and malnourished. We found some bruises, old and new, mostly on her arms and back." Keanu's stomach twisted with anger. He clenched his fists to keep himself calm. "Who did this to her?" he whispered, not really expecting an answer. The nurse hesitated. "Social services has been notified. They'll be here soon to assess the situation and see if any family can be contacted. For now, we just want to make sure she's safe and comfortable." Keanu nodded, glancing back at Lily, who was half asleep but still holding onto his hand. He forced himself to smile. "You're doing great, kiddo. Just rest now." Lily's lips moved slightly, barely a whisper. "You won't leave, right?" Keanu leaned closer, brushing a gentle hand over her hair. "Never. I'm right here." Just as he thought Lily had finally drifted off, the door opened and a woman walked in, her presence almost too stern for the room. She flashed a badge. "Karen Dawson, Social Services." Keanu straightened up, instantly on guard. "Mr. Reeves, I need to speak with you about Lily," Karen said firmly, though her tone wasn't unkind. Keanu gave a small nod and followed her just outside the room, keeping the door slightly open so he could still see Lily. Karen cleared her throat, glancing at her notes. "We've been trying to locate her mother, but there's been no response. Neighbors reported hearing fights and seeing the mother leave with a suitcase a few days ago. No one has seen her since." Keanu's jaw clenched, his anger barely contained. "So she just left? Abandoned her own child?" Karen sighed. "It looks that way. We're still investigating, but for now, Lily will have to be placed into temporary foster care." The thought of Lily being shuffled around from house to house made Keanu's heart ache. He didn't know much about the foster system, but he knew it wasn't always kind or fair. "Isn't there any other option?" he asked, desperation leaking into his voice. Karen gave him a measured look, almost hesitant. "Mr. Reeves, I understand your concern, but you're not related to her. The system has protocols. Unless you have a legal connection or are willing to foster her yourself, we have to follow the proper process." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. Foster her himself? Was he even prepared for something like that? His life was chaotic. Filming, traveling, interviews. But one look through the small gap in the door at Lily lying there, fragile and alone, and his mind made itself up. "I'll do it," he said firmly. Karen looked at him, eyebrows raised. "I want to foster her, whatever it takes." Karen seemed taken aback, but she quickly composed herself. "Mr. Reeves, fostering a child is a serious commitment. It's not just about wanting to help. It's about being able to provide a stable environment, emotional support, and care. Are you sure?" Keanu nodded without hesitation. "She deserves better than being thrown into a system that might not protect her. I can give her a home. I won't let her go through this alone." Karen considered him for a long moment before nodding. "All right, we'll need to do a background check and evaluate your living situation. It'll take some time, but if you're serious, we'll start the process." Keanu's shoulders relaxed just a bit, relief washing over him. "I'm serious. Do whatever you have to. Just don't let her be alone." Karen gave him a small, understanding smile before walking away to make arrangements. Keanu lingered by the door, peeking in to see Lily still lying quietly on the hospital bed. He slipped back inside, pulling the chair closer to her and brushing his thumb gently over her small hand. When she opened her eyes and saw him, a weak smile curved her lips. "You're still here?" Keanu couldn't help but smile back. "Told you I wasn't going anywhere." A tear slipped down Lily's cheek, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from something that felt almost like hope. Keanu held her hand tighter, silently vowing to protect her, no matter what it took. The next few days passed in a whirlwind of paperwork, background checks, and home evaluations. Keanu stayed at the hospital as much as he could, never straying far from Lily's side. She was still quiet and withdrawn, but every now and then he caught glimpses of that small, hesitant smile when he cracked a joke or brought her something from the hospital cafeteria. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, Karen entered the room carrying a folder. Keanu straightened, sensing something important. "Mr. Reeves," she began, her expression softer than usual, "I have good news. Your application to become Lily's temporary guardian has been approved. Given the circumstances and your willingness to provide care, the court has granted you emergency fostering rights while the investigation continues." Relief flooded Keanu's face, and he glanced down at Lily, who looked up at him with cautious hope. He knelt beside her bed, giving her a reassuring smile. "Did you hear that, kiddo? You're coming home with me." Lily's eyes widened, and for a moment she didn't seem to understand. "Really?" she whispered, as if scared it was a dream. Keanu nodded, brushing her hair back gently. "Yeah, you don't have to be alone anymore." Karen cleared her throat gently, giving Keanu a moment before adding, "You'll need to meet with a child psychologist regularly to help Lily process everything. It's important she feels safe and supported." Keanu nodded. "Of course, whatever she needs." Once the paperwork was finalized, Keanu took Lily by the hand and led her out of the hospital, his car parked right at the entrance. He opened the passenger door and helped her inside, carefully buckling her seatbelt before sliding into the driver's seat. As they drove through the city, Lily stared out the window, watching the lights blur past. Keanu glanced at her, wondering what was going through her mind. Trying to lighten the mood, he asked, "You hungry? We can grab something on the way." She hesitated, then nodded slightly. "Pizza?" she whispered, as if unsure whether it was okay to ask. Keanu smiled warmly. "Pizza it is." They stopped by a small family-owned pizzeria where the owner, recognizing Keanu, insisted on giving them extra slices and a box of garlic bread. Keanu thanked him, carrying the food back to the car and handing Lily a slice as they sat parked on a quiet street. Lily took a tentative bite, and for the first time, Keanu saw a real smile break through. It was small and fleeting, but it was there. He felt a sense of victory, like he'd just crossed a major hurdle. "Is it good?" he asked, taking a bite of his own slice. Lily nodded, wiping a bit of sauce from her cheek. "The best," she whispered. They drove on, the silence now comfortable rather than tense. When they finally pulled up to Keanu's house, Lily's eyes widened at the sprawling garden and cozy porch lights. She seemed almost scared to step out, like it was too much to believe. Keanu opened her door, offering a hand. "Welcome home, kiddo." Lily took his hand cautiously, looking around as they walked inside. The house was warm and inviting, filled with soft lighting and the faint smell of cedar wood. Keanu led her to a guest room that he had prepared earlier, filled with soft blankets, a small teddy bear on the pillow, and a nightlight in the corner. Lily stood frozen at the doorway, unsure how to react. Keanu knelt down, giving her a gentle smile. "It's all yours. You don't have to worry about anything here. You're safe now." Her lips quivered, and she hesitated before throwing her arms around his neck, holding on like he was the only stable thing in her world. Keanu wrapped his arms around her, letting her sob quietly into his shoulder. He didn't say anything, just held her, knowing that no words could fix the pain she'd been through. When she finally pulled back, wiping her teary eyes, she looked at the teddy bear on the bed. Keanu picked it up and handed it to her. "He's yours too. Thought you might need a friend." Lily hugged the bear tightly, her voice muffled against its soft fur. "Thank you." Keanu smiled, brushing a tear from her cheek. "Anytime, kiddo. Now, how about we watch a movie before bed?" She nodded eagerly, the hint of a smile returning as they made their way to the living room. Keanu put on an animated movie, something light and funny, and watched as Lily's face slowly lit up with laughter. Seeing her relax, even just a little, felt like a victory. As the movie played, Lily eventually fell asleep on the couch, the teddy bear tucked under her arm. Keanu draped a soft blanket over her, sitting beside her to make sure she was comfortable. He couldn't help but feel a wave of protectiveness wash over him. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he was doing something truly meaningful, something that went beyond fame and fortune. Protecting Lily, giving her a safe place to heal, that was more important than anything else in the world right now. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting a warm glow across the living room. Keanu stirred awake, realizing he had dozed off on the couch while keeping watch over Lily. She was still curled up, the teddy bear clutched tightly to her chest, her breathing soft and steady. He stretched carefully, not wanting to wake her, and headed to the kitchen to make breakfast. As he cracked eggs into a bowl, he couldn't help but think about how drastically his life had changed overnight. Just a few days ago, his biggest worry was memorizing lines and hitting the right emotions on set. Now, his every thought revolved around this fragile little girl who had found her way into his heart. The faint sound of footsteps made him turn. Lily stood at the doorway, rubbing her eyes, looking hesitant and a little lost. Keanu gave her a warm smile. "Morning, kiddo. You like scrambled eggs?" he asked, keeping his tone light. She nodded slowly, still holding the teddy bear. Keanu gestured to the counter. "Why don't you come help me? You can be my official egg whisker." A tiny smile broke through as Lily shuffled over, and Keanu handed her the whisk. She gave it a cautious stir, and he couldn't help but chuckle at her focused expression. As they cooked together, Lily glanced up at him, her voice small but curious. "Are you really going to keep me here?" Keanu's smile softened, and he knelt down to her level, looking into her eyes. "Yeah, you're safe here, Lily. I'm not going to let anything bad happen to you. You don't have to be scared anymore." She looked at him for a long moment before nodding, as if finally allowing herself to believe it. When breakfast was ready, they sat at the kitchen table, and Keanu made sure to keep the conversation light, talking about movies, asking her about her favorite cartoons, anything to make her feel comfortable. Just as they were finishing up, there was a knock at the door. Keanu's heart skipped a beat, and he gave Lily a reassuring nod before going to answer it. Karen stood on the other side, holding a folder and giving him a professional but gentle smile. "Good morning, Mr. Reeves," she greeted. "I just wanted to check in on Lily and go over a few things regarding her temporary placement." Keanu let her in, and Lily tensed slightly when she saw the social worker. Karen offered her a kind smile. "Hi, Lily. How are you doing today?" Lily just gave a small nod, staying close to Keanu. Karen took a seat, flipping through her paperwork. "The investigation regarding her mother is ongoing. Unfortunately, we still haven't located her. There's a chance she may have left the state." Keanu bit back his frustration. "So what happens now?" Karen looked at him seriously. "Right now, Lily remains under your care as a temporary guardian. We'll be conducting follow-up visits and evaluations, but given your background check and your willingness to provide stability, things look promising for a more permanent arrangement." Keanu glanced at Lily, who was quietly listening but clearly overwhelmed. He nodded, determination hardening his resolve. "I'm committed to taking care of her, whatever it takes." Karen gave him an approving nod. I know this is a big responsibility, but it's clear that Lily feels safe with you. Just keep being there for her. Emotional stability is crucial right now." Keanu saw the way Lily's small hands trembled slightly and placed his own over hers to calm her. "I've got her," he promised, giving Karen a confident look. Karen packed up her files and stood. "I'll be in touch. If you need any support or resources, don't hesitate to call." After she left, Keanu turned to Lily, giving her a reassuring grin. "How about we do something fun today? Maybe go to the park?" Lily hesitated, looking uncertain. Can we just stay here?" Keanu nodded without missing a beat. "Of course, we can build a fort in the living room and watch movies all day." Her eyes lit up at the idea, and for the first time, she gave him a genuine, unguarded smile. It was small, but it was real, and it filled Keanu's heart with a warmth he hadn't felt in a long time. They spent the day building the most elaborate pillow fort he could manage, draping blankets from the couch to the chairs, and stringing up little fairy lights he found in a storage box. Inside the fort, they watched animated movies, eating snacks and laughing at the silly scenes. When evening came, Lily started to doze off inside the fort, her head resting on Keanu's arm. He looked down at her peaceful face, marveling at how resilient she was despite everything she'd been through. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Trauma like hers didn't just fade overnight, but he was prepared to face it. As the room fell quiet, Keanu couldn't help but feel that fate had brought them together. He didn't know why or how, but he was grateful. For once, he wasn't just a spectator in someone's story. He was part of something real and important. And for Lily, it meant finding hope in a world that had once seemed hopeless.